Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 129. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast, an offshoot of Planet America on the ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel or at 9:30 on ABC TV on Wednesdays as well. You can also see it on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. And if you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook and YouTube, where you will see Dr. David Smith himself, Dr. Pepper. Dr. Dave, tell us your disclaimer.
Hi, I'm an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. However, I do not speak for either institution, okay? When I am doing this podcast, you are receiving my words unconnected to any institution and only loosely connected to me.
Fair enough. Well delivered. Are you grateful for anything, Dr. Pepper?
I have just finished a very good novel, which has become unexpectedly topical, by Joshua Cohen, called The Netanyahus, which is a fictionalized account of Benjamin Netanyahu's father, Ben Zion Netanyahu, who was an historian of, mainly an historian of the Jewish experience in medieval Europe, especially medieval Spain, but a huge number of other things as well. Like, he was very prolific, and he was a very prolific revisionist Zionist activist as well. And this is a fictionalized account of when he applied for a job at a liberal arts college in upstate New York in 1960 and went to this college with his then very young family for a job talk. Now, I'm not making this sound very funny, but it is really very, very funny book that also, it really, for those who are perhaps not that familiar with Jewish experience in the US, and with Zionism, it gives a very good kind of breakdown of the divisions within Jewish experience and how a lot of the major divisions within Jewish experience in Europe, like the division between Central European Jews and Eastern European Jews, were reproduced in the United States and also reproduced in Israel itself and reproduced in Zionism. So it's, as well as being a very funny comedy, especially if you're not that well predisposed to the Netanyahu family, it is actually a very, very good book about Jewish experience as well.
If I've learnt anything from young Einstein, and
Yes.
I've learnt so much from young Einstein,
Oh,
is
yes.
that anything with the word Yahoo in it automatically becomes hilarious. So I'm sure it is very good. Does this go onto the book list?
Yes, this absolutely goes onto the
Okay.
book list.
You can find that book list in the blurb on our Facebook, under the Facebook video or under the YouTube video.
Did you ever see any of Yahoo Serious's follow-up movies?
I saw Reckless Kelly.
You saw Reckless Kelly.
Yes.
How was
I
that?
did.
That's one of the biggest busts in the history of Australian cinema.
It featured the word Yahoo.
Yes.
Therefore, it's hilarious. That's all I have to say about Reckless Kelly. I'm grateful
Yes.
to McGovern and Massey, two congressmen who have been trying to get Merrick Garland to drop the charges against Julian Assange.
Oh, okay.
They've been circulating a letter around Congress to drum up support. Mm-hmm. McGovern's quite far left. Massey is quite far right.
Yes.
They're trying to get as much bipartisan support as possible, and they want to send that to Biden while Albo's around.
Okay.
And look, it's easy to forget about Assange. I have, to be honest, until I was reminded by that letter.
Yeah.
But he's been rotting in an English prison for 4 years in terrible health.
Yes.
And what for? Let's not forget why he was charged. It wasn't for all the things that people were angry at him about. It was for collateral murder.
Yes.
His triumph.
Yeah.
The leaks that no one has a problem with apart
Yes.
from the US government.
Yeah.
Pure, obvious journalism.
Yes.
Leaks that were vetted by the
way,
New York Times and the
when
Guardian.
Chaz says he was charged for collateral murder, that he's not saying he
So,
was charged. He's not saying that he was charged with murder.
No.
He was charged over a video that was called collateral
Thank
murder.
you, yes.
I just thought I would clarify that just in case people aren't terribly familiar with this. He was not facing a murder charge.
I'm really glad that you clarified that.
Yes.
But he was basically charged with essentially illegal acts of journalism. It's like it was very obvious journalism. The leaks were vetted by both New York Times and The Guardian, and they're not in jail.
No.
And in hindsight, this looked bad at the time when he was charged under the Trump administration. Now it looks even worse because, like, at the time when he was charged, there was some fear, I guess, that radical transparency might have been scary, and who knows what's going to happen with the leaks. Well, look, since then, we've found that jailing Assange hasn't stopped the leaking. What it's done is we've seen leaking become more malign.
Yes, yeah.
Like, at least Assange used to release everything he could, right? Whereas now, we're now getting used to leakers leaking to random unreliable websites, just the bits that suit the leakers.
Yes.
Now, like how many years have we been seeing bits from Hunter Biden's laptop without seeing the whole laptop?
Yes, yeah.
If this was John Assange, you would have got the whole laptop, right? It's, but what we see is that's a lot of photos.
yeah. I was going to say, yeah.
But I mean, he might not have seen that as fit to leak.
No.
But I'm just saying, when he leaked things, he leaked the lot.
Yes.
Whereas, subject to vetting, whatever. Whereas now, the leaks are much more malign, I think. Per Strzok's text messages a few years back, we just saw the ones that suited the committee, right? I wish leaking was more like in Assange's day. Anyway, the Obama administration decided not to press charges.
Yep.
And yet 3 years into the Biden administration, the charges continue to be pressed.
Yeah.
Now, I get Biden isn't the one who's supposed to be making the charges decisions.
Yes.
That's Merrick Garland,
Yep.
the Attorney General. But nevertheless, I'm grateful to McGovern and Massey for working on a bipartisan basis for something so important. I wish them best of luck.
Okay. Good luck to them.
Thank you. Let's get straight into some updates. I'm not going to do too much chatter because we got a lot to talk about. And we're starting a bit late because of something which I'm not going to tell you about, I've decided.
Okay.
Maybe. We'll see how we go. Let's start with the debate update. It's only a week and a half away, the next debate.
Only a week and a half away?
I can't believe it. There's the qualifications now are at least 70,000 unique donors and 4% support in 2 national polls or 1 national and 2 state polls.
Yeah.
I think the Burgum era might be at
Oh,
an end. Like we've seen him. The people who have qualified, Chris Christie,
Yep.
Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley have all qualified.
Okay.
Trump obviously has, but he says he won't be there. Mike Pence has reached the polling threshold, but not the donors threshold. Sorry, mate. Tim Scott has reached neither threshold.
No.
Ramaswamy says he might not attend, but I don't know if that's true or not. I think he's got the shits a little bit about how he was treated the last one.
Yes.
It might only have 3 debaters: DeSantis, Haley, and Christie.
Yeah.
Or it might be 4. But the end is nigh for the Pence and Scott campaigns if they can't get into debates.
Well,
You got nothing to share on that?
No. I mean, the fact that this charade is still going on
You think
is.
it's time to wrap up?
I do think it's time to wrap up. I mean,
Even before a single vote? I agree with you, but
yeah.
I mean, look, I don't think they should wrap up before the first primary, but I agree that we should stop pretending soon. Yeah.
By the way, I mean, debate primaries are a relatively recent thing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When
there was, I think there was, I think there was one in the 1950s or something. But debate primaries
there were primaries in the 1950s.
Well, they were, but this is the thing. Primaries weren't used by all states as their method of selecting candidates until the McGovern-Fraser reforms of 1972. So you didn't start to get primary debates until 1980.
Yeah.
So Carter refused to engage in them on the Democratic side, but there were these Republican primary debates that happened. Now, Ronald Reagan, but what would happen though was it was before each state held its primary or caucus. Now, Ronald Reagan was pretty far in front by the time that these votes actually started, so he refused to participate in the second one. But then he actually sponsored a second debate before New Hampshire. George H.W. Bush went along under the misunderstanding that it would just be between him and Reagan. But then all the other candidates were there at the same time. And so George H.W. Bush threw a hissy fit and refused to participate until all of the other candidates left. And then so it was just this debate between him and Reagan, sponsored by the Manchester Union leader. And but yeah, it took a long time to actually it took a long time to actually get started. And at one point, I think Reagan was disagreeing with the moderator about how the debate was going to proceed. And I think that the moderator cut off Reagan's microphone or something. And Reagan bellowed "Mr. Moderator, I am paying for this microphone," because he'd sponsored the entire debate. So this is the inglorious history of the origin of primary debates.
I didn't know Reagan was that cheap.
Even worse than presidential debates.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you shared that. There you go. I knew you had something.
Yeah.
Very quick, Clarence Thomas update. Harlan Crow.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
We're talking about the $267,000 motor coach that Clarence Thomas bought with the help of his good mate, Harlan Crow. He gave him a loan. According to the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee, Thomas failed to repay, quote, a significant proportion or perhaps any of the loan. Nearly 9 years later, the outstanding debt was forgiven without evidence of Thomas paying much or, in fact, anything back at all. I think there's an obvious conclusion we can draw here, and that's nice to have good friends.
That's right.
Is that your conclusion?
Look, what I just love is that Clarence Thomas has spent so many years getting all of this stuff from Harlan Crow, but so much of the stuff that he's been getting, so many of the benefits that he has had, have just been such absolute shit.
That's a bit unfair on motor coaches.
This fucking motor coach. The things that, a lot of the stuff that emerged, I was he got to share a box seat with Tom Osborne, retired University of Nebraska coach, at a University of Nebraska football game. They have not been good for 30 years.
Of course you got worked up about that.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Oh, but you get to hang out in Lincoln, Nebraska for a weekend.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Look, I don't have much to say. I just want to just keep people updated.
Yeah, well,
there we go.
Yeah, good. Keep everyone updated.
There's all kinds of Trump legal updates we got to do quickly.
Yes.
Where we left you at the end of last week was Sidney Powell had just flipped. Mm-hmm. We asked who would be the next to flip. We didn't make a guess. It turned out to be Chesbro.
Yes,
Chesbro.
And I'm really annoyed about this because he flipped a few hours after we recorded the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, before it came out, actually.
Yes, yeah.
It was very annoying.
Seriously, Kenneth, who else has treated you as well as we have?
No one.
No one.
No one, Kenneth.
Not only have we constantly mentioned your name, we even taught ourselves how to pronounce it properly.
Yeah.
Despite the comedic sacrifice that entailed.
Yeah.
And then you go and do this to us.
The least he could have done when he pled guilty was to say, "I cheese, bro," just to throw us a bone. Apparently, someone on I didn't get the name down because I've been in a huge rush, but one of our commenters noted that apparently his nickname way back when was the cheese.
The cheese.
So we can at least grab onto that. The cheese.
Yeah. But anyway, all I can say is no one's going to love you like we did.
No.
So.
No, and we certainly don't anymore. It obviously made sense that he would flip because his trial was next. His trial was about to start. That does make sense. Although I'm not entirely sure that he is the person who needs to be most worried about Sidney Powell's testimony.
No.
Because obviously, Sidney Powell, her area was number one, the Coffee County stuff. They're stealing the data from the Coffee County election office. And she can also tell us about Trump's seemingly recurring interest in seizing the nation's election machines.
Yes.
Which he was talking about to her.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she can also tell us about his desire to make her a special counsel as well, which are interesting areas for Trump. But also, a number of indictment enthusiasts that I've been reading up about since there's quite a community of indictment enthusiasts out there, Dave. Is that the person Sidney Powell had most to do with was Rudy Giuliani.
Yes.
You might recall the hair dye press conference.
Absolutely, yes.
It was ripping down his forehead.
Yep.
She also had a bit to do with Trump's wannabe Attorney General, Jeff Clark, who also took an active interest in the events in Georgia.
Yes.
If you recall, Jeff Clark had an hour-long phone conversation with Scott Hall just before the Coffee County data theft.
He was the bail bondsman.
Who also flipped.
The first one.
Yes. So between Powell and Hall, Jeff Clark could be under incredible pressure somewhere down the road.
All of these people have incredibly Anglo names, don't they?
Not Cheese Bro. Bloody Kenneth. Cheese. Anyway, but remember, Sidney Powell was never his lawyer. That's what Trump claims now.
No.
Now he claims that.
I mean, my contention is that none of these people were ever lawyers. But okay.
But it's not so easy to prove.
Yeah.
That can be your contention. But the way you'd normally prove that someone wasn't your lawyer is to prove that you never paid them any money. But in Trump's case, that proves they are his lawyer.
That reminds me, do you remember an incident a few years ago where it turned out that Rudy Giuliani had been giving Sean Hannity legal advice?
Yes, I do recall that.
And that was seen as something of a conflict of interest, given that Rudy Giuliani was a frequent guest on Sean Hannity's shows. And Sean Hannity explained this as... Oh, well, I was looking for some legal advice on a real estate deal that I was doing. So just when I was having a chat with Rudy in the green room, I slipped him $10 and said, all right, now we're under attorney-client privilege, which I've got a very limited understanding of the law, but my understanding is that's not the way it works.
I don't believe it works that way, but I do believe that Rudy Giuliani works that way. So he would have taken that money gratefully, I reckon. Just rattling along to Cheese, because I was just talking about Powell, Chesbro's, the Cheeses plea deal, same kind of thing as Powell, pled guilty, single felony count of conspiracy to commit filing of false documents. That was the fake electors document. Those are false documents. Punishment, $5,000, 5 years probation, apology, and testifying against other defendants. It's pretty much similar. Difference between him and Sidney Powell. Powell's plea deal was to a misdemeanor. His is to a felony. So he might be disbarred because of that, which would be a great shame for the cheese. Importantly, him pleading guilty to conspiracy to file false documents helps establish that the scheme generated false documents.
Yes.
Which will be useful down the track.
Yes. And this, as Chaz especially has pointed out many times before, is how these RICO cases work.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea is just flip, flip, flip. With every flip, more things get established. More testimony gets put on the table. This is how the snowball builds. This
is classic RICO, and it also is good for Willis because it gets the Powell cheese trial out of the way, the big cheese trial, which she wouldn't have wanted because that would have tipped off everyone else to how she was going to proceed. So to get that out of the way, great news for her. Who did the big cheese work with? He discussed the fake electors scheme with, guess who? Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, it really is. All roads lead to Giuliani.
Oh yeah, and we're not finished yet. He also had dealings with John Eastman. Let's not forget him. So that's
I haven't forgotten him.
Anything else to say about the big cheese before we close the book? Let's go on to Jenna Ellis. The pleading continues. Jenna Ellis pled guilty to 1 count of aiding and abetting false statements.
Yes.
She was originally charged with solicitation of violation of oath by public officer and RICO violation. She is sentenced again to 5 years probation, $5,000 fine, testifying against defendants and apology. Who's this affect? She worked closely with one man.
Rudy Giuliani.
You got it. He's got the clean sweep. Ellis, in her official apology, said that she had relied on the wisdom of more experienced attorneys, and that, of course, would have been...
Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah! So Giuliani is either going to be the guy who goes to jail for the longest time, I suspect.
Yes.
Or he's going to be the guy who gets Trump convicted.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, at this point... Maybe Trump would start to worry about the fact that he's basically kicked Giuliani to the curb.
Yeah.
And that Giuliani has very little left to lose, including money or possessions.
Yeah, I'd be worried about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he lost his dignity a long time ago. So,
yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's strangely and cheaply putting Giuliani in a very strange position, like where Giuliani has all these charges and all these legal issues and no money.
Yes,
And Trump's got a lot of money.
Yeah.
He could spare some of it.
And Giuliani says he has not been paid for all of these legal services.
Which is kind of fair.
Yeah.
Of all the people that Trump hasn't paid.
Yes, yeah.
but still, that's anyway. So that's an interesting development. And we did say a few months back that the Jenna Ellis being stiffed by Trump was going to come back to bite in.
Oh, totally.
And so we now say that about Giuliani.
Yeah. I mean, Jenna Ellis was a very good example of she had no experience with constitutional law other than, I've read, teaching pre-law classes at University of Colorado. Okay. So, all of her practice was in civil and criminal law in Colorado. She had never appeared in a federal or district court, which is where constitutional law cases happen. And her role in all of that was amplifying basically every ludicrous claim that could be made, including, I'm forgetting his name now, but he got Michigan and Minnesota confused. He showed this devastating graphic of votes from Michigan.
That guy.
Yes, it turned out that they were actually votes from Minnesota. And
That's right.
Then there was the stuff from Antrim County in Michigan, which was to do with an error with the way that votes were configured, which was briefly, supposedly evidence of votes being flipped by officials and by automatic voting machines. And then the same guy, the Michigan-Minnesota guy, claimed that 100,000 votes in Georgia had come out of nowhere. He claimed the provenance of 100,000 votes in Georgia could not be determined. So she was elevating. Sorry not to be attaching any names to any of this.
This is off the top of your head.
It's been going on for so long now. But anyway, she was elevating claims that can only be described as laughably false. But even though they were laughably false at the time, she is now cryingly regretful.
She is. She did cry.
She did cry.
Quite literally cried.
Yes.
So that's the end of the pleading. Although we got Mark Meadows as well. God, there's a big week for Trump legals.
Yeah.
Mark Meadows. Now the story about him was that he spoke with, this is an ABC exclusive. That's ABC America. Spoke with Special Counsel Jack Smith's team at least 3 times this year, including once before a federal grand jury, and he only spoke after Smith granted him immunity to testify under oath.
Wow.
Now, my view on this, do you have anything to say about this before I go on?
No, I want to hear your view.
Okay, my view is I don't think this story is worth much. I think that they sold it like it was this big deal. Yep. I don't think it's a big deal. First, for a start, people are acting like he flipped. Being granted immunity is not flipping.
No.
He did not flip. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what did he actually offer? Let's look at what he offered. Now, I'm only going from the news article here. There may be things we don't know that aren't in the news article. There almost certainly are. But he offered that his book was full of bullshit. Yep. Right, which is, knock me over the feather. Yes. Charge Trump with solicitation of crimes against publishing, if you like. He revealed that he privately had told Trump that Giuliani hadn't produced any evidence to back up his many allegations, which I think Trump probably would have known if Trump was at all rational.
Would have intuited.
Yes. He told Trump, he says that he believed at the time that Trump clearly lost, and that he said that. Trump denies that. He says that he never believed any of the claims they were making at the time. Yeah. All of that is what Bill Barr has already given us. Yes, yeah. Now, and Meadows wasn't his lawyer or his attorney general.
No, absolutely not.
Bill Barr's view was of much more weight than Mark Meadows. Yes. Mark Meadows saying, I also said this, I don't think is worth much. No. Like if either Bill Barr is enough and his entire Justice Department is enough, or if they're not enough, then one other dude is not going to make a difference, right? So I think none of that matters.
Wow. This could be a segment called Chaz Throws Cold Water on That.
I'm not finished. That's
not finished. Glass. He's going to get another bucket.
That was just the first glass. A little reminder. What they're looking for is evidence that Trump realized that all his claims of a rigged election were bogus.
Oh, yes.
That's what they're looking for, right? Yeah. That's what they want. Now, they might not need it. No. But that's the smoking gun.
It's my view that they don't, but anyway.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yep. But that's what they're trying to get, right?
Yep.
It'll make their job a lot easier if they get that, at the very least.
Yes.
Now, we know that everyone told him the claims were bogus already. But did he believe them?
Did he believe them?
Meadows told investigators that he, Mark Meadows, has long believed that Trump was being dishonest when he made that statement. His evidence? Given the fact that votes were still being counted and the results from several states were not in yet. Boo! That's not evidence.
No, that's really not.
That's speculation.
Yeah.
The only tiny sliver of something interesting that he offered, that I saw in that article, was when the US Supreme Court on December 11th, 2020, denied Trump's final court challenge. Trump told Meadows, according to Meadows, something to the effect of, then that's the end, or so that's it. Two completely different statements, but they mean kind of a similar thing.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what they've got. Now, that's pretty vague to me, but it gets worse.
Yeah.
Here's the bucket. Meadows was specifically asked if Trump ever acknowledged to him that he'd lost the election. Meadows told investigators he'd never heard Trump say that. This is not useful. Okay. I should also say something a little bit weird about Meadows.
There's a lot of things that are a bit weird about Meadows.
Well, it's a bit weird about Meadows in this article. Which I don't know the answer. I'm just flagging.
Yes.
It's something I'm just a little, my ears just pricked up on.
Yeah.
We don't know when he spoke to Jack Smith. We know it's sometime this year.
Yes.
We don't know if it was before or after the Georgia indictment. But what we do know is that some of what he said to Smith seems to slightly contradict what Fani Willis is claiming about him.
Right, okay.
So Meadows might either be an unreliable witness for whatever he's worth.
Yes.
Or he might need to resolve some contradictions.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just the article was written poorly. I don't know, but I just saw that, that doesn't quite match that. Doesn't quite match that. So anyway, so we'll see what happens there. But that's my take on Mark Meadows.
I have no reason to disagree with your take on Mark Meadows.
Fair enough. Well, that is why you are foolish. But anyway, then we got the fraud trial.
Yeah.
It's a big week. Trump's been there on and off for the week, putting on a show. He doesn't need to...
By the way, let's keep reminding ourselves, it has already been determined that he committed fraud, that he fraudulently inflated the values of his properties.
Yes.
The big question of this trial is, what punishment is he going to face?
That is absolutely true. It's good to remind people of that.
Yep.
But just to be clear as well, this is a civil trial.
Yes.
So he does not need to be there.
Yes.
But he chose to be there.
He chooses to be there.
Yeah, he chose to be there. He was trying to stare down Michael Cohen, I think. But whatever.
Yes.
But the fact is he chose to be there, and Biden-Harris HQ, I have to say, had a good pickup on this.
Yep.
Which I'm going to play you because it was quite funny.
Okay.
They sandwiched two moments together from one of his press chats that he does outside.
Yep.
They were a few minutes apart. They claim to be 3 minutes apart. I haven't run the clock on it.
Okay.
But they were definitely pretty close together.
Okay.
These 2 moments. Okay, so just enjoy here.
But this is what we go through because they want to keep me here instead of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and lots of other great places. They want me to be here.
Will you be back tomorrow by any chance?
Probably not. Probably we're having a very big tournament, professional golf tournament at Durrell, so probably not. Thank you.
So this whole trial is just about keeping him in the court.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be there. So to stop him campaigning is all rigged.
Yeah.
Election interference. But he's not going to be there tomorrow because he's going to a golf tournament.
Yeah, by the way, the golf tournament that he is talking about as well, it's not a real golf tournament. It's the Saudi-sponsored LIV golf bullshit.
Oh, okay.
Where these golfers play in teams.
Yeah.
Like, golf purists consider this to be this absolute abomination.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like, they play in teams together, and I think that the motto of it is golf but louder. Which means that there's apparently when you're on the course, you can kind of constantly hear some dance track going on in the distance.
What, they play like basketball music? Why?
Yeah.
Like dun dun dun
Yeah.
dun.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's like an Ariana Grande song or something.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Like it's supposed to be totally, contrary to all of the decorum of golf or what. This is not a sport that I care about at all.
Is it televised? Can you hear the music on TV?
Well, the thing is, very, very few people watch it on TV.
Yeah.
Very, very few people watch it at the course either. It's very, very sparsely attended. They have to pay obscure cable networks to carry it.
Okay.
Right? No one will pay for the TV rights to this because it's bullshit and nobody likes watching it. What this the Saudi PIF basically did was to create this tournament, put a kind of malevolent but also hapless Greg Norman as the figurehead of it, and then buy up, like paying extraordinary amounts for a lot of the world's top golfers, including Australia's Cameron Smith, not the retired Melbourne Storm captain, the 20 years younger, mulleted and moustached golfer.
Yeah.
Him and Brooks Koepka and Phil Mickelson was their highest, their biggest recruit to all of this because he was carrying all these grudges against the PGA. And so they've basically created this really shitty product no one wants to watch. But because they are paying all these golfers extraordinary amounts, the inevitable result is that they have basically muscled in on the PGA. Like there was really nothing that the PGA could do about it if so many of their top players were defecting. And the PGA was threatening the top players with bans from PGA tournaments, when they wouldn't get the prestige of all of that. But it's really hard to argue with the kind of money that that the Saudis through LIV were paying them. So earlier this year, the PGA announced a merger with this joke of a competition.
So it's like World Series cricket all over again.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. Like, except for the fact that World Series cricket actually arguably introduced things into cricket that improved at least the limited overs version of it, and are still with us to this day, and and are still really liked. Whereas, like, nobody wants this team sport play.
Is the PGA playing Ariana Grande?
No, I don't think that they are. But
I would like to see the Venn diagram of the sets of people who like golf and people who like Ariana Grande. And see how much overlap there is.
That's right. So, yes. So there was a merger, but that merger is now subject to all kinds of antitrust lawsuits, and so it probably won't go through. If you are interested in this saga, the sports site Defector, which is a subscriber site that I subscribe to and I really love, covers this in a lot of depth. So they actually just, I think it was Chris Thompson they sent along to that tournament at Doral, and he gave a very lengthy description of how shit it all was. David Roth has written about this as well. My only final question on this is, at the Trump version of this tournament, rather than playing Ariana Grande, do they play Andrew Lloyd Webber? Look, you should suggest that to them. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sure he has.
Yes.
That was a very entertaining Tangent Treehouse.
Oh, yes.
I've really got to get a sting for that. Do you have anything to say about Michael Cohen's testimony during the trial?
So Michael Cohen said that Trump had actively told him to make up estimates of his net worth based on what he felt like.
Let me read you the quote. I was asked by Trump to increase total assets based upon the number he arbitrarily elected, and my responsibility was to reverse engineer and increase those assets to achieve the number Trump had tasked us to.
But can I just come back once again to the fact that Trump has in court given this radical theory of wealth estimation. When he was suing Tim O'Brien over his book Trump Nation in 2005, because Tim O'Brien alleged that he was worth substantially less than $1 billion rather than $8 billion, Trump lost that suit because when a judge actually asked him, so how do you estimate your net worth? He said, it depends on a lot of things, blah, blah, market fluctuations. He said, and even my own feelings sometimes. Right, so he does have a radically subjective view of estimation of wealth. And, like a lot of things with Trump, the reason why that sometimes sounds plausible to people is because it's true. There are very subjective elements to wealth because it is now widely accepted that things are worth how much people are prepared to buy them for and how much they are prepared to sell them for. It's, that point of how much prepared to buy, how much prepared to sell, that is how much something's worth. For Trump, though, it's always a very, very one-sided subjectivity.
Yes.
Yeah, it's how much he thinks that he should be able to sell it for.
Yes.
Not how much someone's prepared to pay for it, how much he thinks he should be able to sell it for.
Yeah, the supply and demand graph for Trump is just a circle.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So to bring together the glorious worlds of economic and literary theory, this theory of worth is actually intersubjective.
Yes.
Yes, it requires the subjectivity of at least two people, not just one.
Sure.
Yes.
I should say Cohen also dumped Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric in it as well. He said they were all in on it as well.
Of course they were.
Yeah, I know. But until now, Eric was pretending he had no idea.
Which he always does a pretty good job of pretending that
He's got no idea.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Okay, I bet you got things to say about the gag orders.
Yeah.
Do you want me to set that up? Or
You set that up.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, there's been at least 2 fines. There might have been a third one. I've heard rumors of a third fine. At least when I'm up to, there are at least 2 fines. The first fine was the fraud trial as well. Engeron very, very clearly instructed Trump that after Trump put up a post alleging that the Engeron, the judge's clerk, was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. He told Trump to take that down, and he said any more posting or talking about my staff in a derogatory way is going to get you fined for contempt of court. And the first fine was when the judge knows. Now, Trump did take that photo down immediately.
Yes.
But it stayed up on donaldjtrump.com for 17 days until the judge noticed and asked them, what's going on with that post that you haven't taken down there yet? Trump's lawyer said it was a mistake. To be honest, I believe him. I don't think Trump is the webmaster of his site.
No.
No,
And attention to detail just is not a general feature of anything Team Trump.
Absolutely. Engeron said that Trump is still responsible.
Yep.
Quote, make no mistake, future violations, whether intentional or unintentional, will subject the violator to far more severe sanctions, including possibly imprisoning him.
Wow.
Okay, so that was the first fine, $5,000. Do you have a view about that fine?
Not really.
No, my personal view is Engeron should probably let that slide because I think it pretty clearly wasn't intentional, and he knew there would be other instances to come.
Yeah.
And so, unless he wants an excuse to bump up the punishment.
That might be what he's doing.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, he chose to go for it,
Yeah.
and then the real violations began soon after.
Yes. Unsurprisingly.
During a break, I think it was 2 days later, Trump told reporters, this judge is a very partisan judge with a person who's very partisan sitting alongside of him, perhaps even much more partisan than he is. Engeron then put him immediately on the stand and asked him, to whom are you referring? Trump said, you and Cohen, Michael Cohen. He said, Michael Cohen is saying he's biased.
Yes.
Engeron did not believe him. And I don't believe him either.
No, I don't believe him.
And so then he fined him $10,000.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if there's another one since then, but that's the last I've heard.
That's the last one that I've heard.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on all this?
Look, my thoughts on all of this are I don't think that Trump can really claim that this is about his First Amendment rights as a presidential candidate. Like, these things don't really have anything to do with that. Now, but then again, me saying he can't really claim that, I am, of course, talking about, the criteria of rationality and correspondence between words and meaning and things like that. Of course he can do that. And of course he will do that.
Yes.
And of course he is doing that.
Yes.
And so we are back to the problem that even, trying to subject him to these most basic standards of legal propriety, yes, you are giving him something that he could use politically, but that's not a reason not to do it. Yeah, because he's going to fundraise off this no matter what. Yeah,
I should say, by the way, for those who are being the table to First Amendments, and I'm not sure there are any of you unless Trump is watching this podcast, which I know he is. He's a big pepper, Trump. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. I would just say these things, when there are competing rights and competing claims, there's always a balance that needs to be struck, right? And in this case, you go, okay, Trump, Engeron has left him, and so has Chutkan and the other trial, has left him with lots of opportunities to talk about bias if he wants to.
Exactly. I think his political speech is actually very well protected by these gag orders.
Yeah. And I get it's just a case of, okay, you can nail 99 out of 100 of your abuses.
Yes.
If you just leave that 1 out of 100, which is this clerk who is really not hurting anyone, just minding her own business. Yeah, but by you doing that, while it really doesn't add much to your general, I think people are going to get the hang of you feeling that the court is rigged against you, even without that, right? But by you adding her, you are ruining her life.
Yes, absolutely.
And so in terms of the balance here, like it's a massive imposition on someone else for no actual benefit to Trump. And like I know that's not the exact test they use, but it's just I think from a just a fairness point of view and just a reasonableness point of view, I think that's worth noting.
Yes.
And so I'm saying, I know you have a lot to say about the speaker.
I do have a lot to say.
Why don't you wind up
about the speaker situation?
Yes.
I'll start with the general observation that this is just an incredible example of minority rule within the Republican Party. Okay, so we've had a lot of talk over the last few years about minority rule in general, but this is about minority rule within the Republican Party. Because if we have a look at the numbers, it was only 8 Republicans who voted against Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
Out of a conference that now numbers 221.
Yes.
Nonetheless, McCarthy is gone. In the first round of voting on who the speaker designate would be, Scalise beat Jordan, clearly. Who actually gets to go to the House floor to have a vote on it? It's Jordan, because Jordan's supporters make it so clear that Scalise wouldn't have the numbers. Even though Scalise's supporters and Kevin McCarthy's supporters also make it clear that Jordan doesn't have the numbers, which we discussed last week, Jordan goes to the floor, not for 1, but for 3 votes anyway, because he's pretty convinced that he can, if he just hangs on for long enough, everyone will give up. But for all the reasons we discussed that last week, that was just too much of an affront to the dignity of the majority within the Republican Party. So then we have the vote that comes down to Emma versus Johnston.
Yep.
Emma wins clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when I woke up to that news that Tom Emma had won, I thought, okay, I'd better do a bit more reading on Tom Emma, find out his positions. I went off to work, went and gave a lecture. 4 hours later, I go back to the internet and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad I didn't do that reading because Emma has already stepped down. It took four hours for Jordan supporters to make it clear that Emma was that Emma was not going to have the numbers. So the guy that he defeated, Johnston, then goes on to actually become the speaker because that exhaustion has kicked in. Okay, so they would not vote for Jordan. They had enough dignity not to vote for Jordan, but someone who is basically functionally identical to Jordan when it comes to voting and his role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. They'll vote for him because they don't really know who he is. No one knows who he is. They just gave up. And even people like Ken Buck, who, his litmus test was you had to recognize the legitimacy of the 2020 election. He ends up voting for the person who has now been identified as perhaps more responsible than anybody for actually engineering the congressional effort to overturn the electoral vote. So we'll get into the specifics of what all these people stand for in a second. Yeah. But the first thing to notice is just this incredible dynamic of minority rule. It was only a sliver of people who were opposed to McCarthy. McCarthy is gone. Scalise beat Jordan. Jordan was the one who actually got to the floor of the House for a vote. Emma beat Johnston. Johnston was the one who not only got to the floor of the House for a vote, but then actually got the speakership. So Gates was crowing about this shows where the power in the Republican caucus is. Now, that was a far more accurate statement than what Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying, which was, well, this shows that the Republican caucus is getting more conservative. Like, maybe it is, but this wasn't sheer weight of numbers of the far right. It was what Gates said about where the power lies. The power lies in the willingness to destroy.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Okay. I got a few things to add to this
Yes.
before we move on to other bits about the story. There's a lot
Yes.
to talk about in the story.
Yes, yeah.
The first thing is,
Yep.
I think there's a few disclaimers we have to, or qualifiers we have to put in what you just said.
Yes.
Which is, this is not a, I don't think this is a feature of the Republican Party necessarily. This is a feature of the Republican Party when they have a 5-seat majority.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if when you have a 5-seat majority, it only takes a tiny minority
Yes, yeah.
to ruin everything.
Yes.
Like now this Republican Party, what they've brought to it
Yep.
is people's willingness
Yes.
to pull the lever.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do that if it wasn't a tiny
That's right.
majority.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first thing I'd say.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is that we need to realize, and we'll talk about Tom Emmer a little bit more, I think, but you need to realize Tom Emmer could have become the speaker.
He absolutely could have. Yes.
He chose not to take it to the floor,
Yes.
knowing,
Yes.
because if I knew this, he knew that,
Yes,
knowing
yeah,
the
yeah.
Democrats were going to vote for him.
Absolutely. Yes.
And he chose to not do that.
Yes.
Right? And the reason he chose to not do that was not because he was worried about the minority of the minority.
Yeah.
He was worried that there's so much partisan rancor in
Yes.
America
Yeah.
that he would be an instant lame duck.
Yes.
As soon as he got voted in by Democrats.
Yes.
And so he didn't even. It was right there, and
Yeah.
he chose to not do it.
Yep.
So I think that's an important thing to
That's
know.
a very important thing to note.
I think another thing that's important to note as well,
Yes.
and this is not just the Republicans, this is just the whole of politics in America at the moment,
Yeah.
is that negative partisanship wins.
Yes.
And if you look at Ken Buck, you mentioned Ken Buck,
Yeah.
who made a real deal about election denialism
yeah.
before supporting the guy who,
Yes.
as you accurately say,
Yeah.
can be most associated with
Yes.
with that particular phenomenon.
Yeah.
Ken Buck, his quote was that Johnston won probably because he has the fewest enemies of anyone in the Republican conference. It wasn't about who he has friends.
Yes.
It's about who he has enemies, and that's zero.
Yeah.
And so that's why, and the other thing, which I think is absolutely critical in why Johnston got up,
Yeah.
is not a function of the numbers. It's a function of the nuclear deterrence, which
Yeah.
is that you're talking about the Jordan fans.
Yes.
It was actually the moderates.
Yeah.
I think they made him get up because number one, they were the ones who were expected to oppose him.
Yes, yes.
But secondly, much more importantly than that, they had let out. This is from Punchbowl, which is a newsletter, a political newsletter. I'm just trying to find
Not
it.
the southwestern suburb of Sydney.
No, they're definitely not from there. I'm just trying to find where it wrote this. It was I got the quote here. Punchbowl wrote, "This is the day of the vote, the Michael Johnston vote." Quote, "If Republicans can't elect Johnston as Speaker, the game is up. Moderate Republicans will go to the floor and join with Democrats to elect Speaker pro tem Patrick McHenry for some indeterminate period of time." So the moderates had spread out.
Yeah.
If we don't get him up now, that's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. We are going to work with the Dems.
Yep.
The 5 of us or the 8 of us or whatever, the
Yeah,
minority of minority you're talking about is a different minority.
Yes.
We're going to work with the Dems and we'll get a Dem-backed speaker up.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, I think, why everyone just fell into line.
Yeah.
So I think that those are some important qualifications. of what
Yes,
you
yeah,
just
yeah.
said.
Very
All right,
important
okay. Anyway,
qualifications.
keep going.
Yeah, and let's actually, first of all, let's go back a little bit to the Jordan vote
Yep.
because last time we spoke, Jordan was still hanging on.
He was.
One of the things that's emerged since then, so he gave up after the third vote, was that people did something that they haven't done before, which was Republicans actually started actively complaining about the threats that they were getting from the base.
Yep.
Now, Jordan distanced himself from that. He said, oh, these threats are terrible, because some of them actually recorded them and played them.
They did.
Violent sexual threats against members of Congress and their
Wives.
And their wives, yes. And he distanced himself from that. How he could distance himself from that when he and Sean Hannity had openly embarked on this campaign of making the contact details of these people available and telling people to contact them. Now, of course, they didn't tell them go and give them murder and rape threats. They told them, contact them and ask them when they're planning to open the house. To the people who make those death threats, that's just the signal that's just the signal to do it. The fact that he tried to distance himself from that, it just basically tells you everything about how Jim Jordan operates, which is under this veil of Midwestern evangelical plausible deniability for everything, right? His same MO as when he was an assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State. But acting in a way that is consistent with knowing exactly what is going on. So, that was an insult that people could not take from Jim Jordan. But I think that whole process was actually completely exhausting.
That's encouraging, though, isn't it? That there's finally been a line drawn on that.
It is, yeah.
That's not the first time this has happened.
Yeah, no, it's not the first time this has happened. Yeah. And Mitt Romney is describing this in his most recent book about just basically the prevalence of violent threats for keeping Republicans in line. The number of times now that Republicans are saying, no, I can't certify the election because of the violent threats that I'm getting. And this stuff needs to come out more into the open because it seems that as a mechanism of, in-group policing, it's becoming pretty powerful. And, you've got Republicans saying, oh, look, all members of Congress get death threats from everyone. But this actually does seem to be becoming a phenomenon that is a pretty powerful mechanism in the Republican Party that needs to be examined. So,
can I say one more thing on Jim Jordan? But I don't know if you've got more to say to him. I should just note that he ended off, unsurprisingly, as a massive hypocrite in his last desperate bid to get the numbers. He told moderate New York holdouts, because there's like 5 of them, but these moderate New Yorkers, that he would support doubling the state and local tax deduction cap in New York to $20,000. So what I mean by that is in high tax states, they have a tax deduction for if you pay a huge amount of tax on your property, you can take that off your federal tax. Yes. So that way you don't get penalized too much for living in a high tax state, right? Yeah. It used to be quite significant.
Yes.
It's and then during the Trump tax reform, one of the best things of the Trump tax reform is they reduced it because the people who are going to pay those taxes are going to be rich people, right? With expensive properties, obviously they can afford it, and he was going to double the state and local tax tax, which is only going straight to the pockets of rich people.
Yes.
And would cut taxes for the rich by $50 billion. This is a guy whose entire campaign was about being a fiscal conservative.
Yeah.
Just signing over $50 billion just for a bribe, essentially.
The good old Republican multiracial working class coalition.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was how he ended off his campaign. So, I'm really glad that he exposed himself as being a massive hypocrite. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So, but I think that was so exhausting that when they get to the, next stage, where the majority of them vote for Tom Emmer, who voted in favor of same-sex marriage, but who even more abhorrently in the eyes of the Republican right voted to certify the 2020 election, remembering that he was in a minority of Republicans who didn't join the protests against those states. So, it was made very clear that he wouldn't have the numbers. And so I think when he steps down within 4 hours, despite, as you say, he would have got Democratic support.
He would have. They definitely hinted they were going to support him.
Yeah, I mean, and Hakeem Jeffries had been saying weeks earlier, we are prepared to. He said there are Republicans who have our respect, not Jim Jordan. But there are Republicans who have our respect. Patrick McHenry was one of them that they cited. Emma definitely would have been in that category, even if it was just for the fact that he actually voted to certify the 2020 election.
Hakeem Jeffries' terms, he was very explicit about it. They weren't much. He wanted assurances that the temporary speaker will support the previously negotiated debt limit deal. This is one that Republicans already signed on to. That they would allow a vote on a supplemental aid to Ukraine and Israel. And that whoever filled the chair should have voted to certify the 2020 presidential election results. They were his entire list of conditions,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
Emma did satisfy.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, Emma stepped down, as we said, very quickly. Now, I think for the majority of Republicans, once that happened, that was it. Like that was the final straw. They had that battle against Jordan had been so taxing that they weren't going to push it they weren't going to push it any further, even though the person they were electing in Mike Johnston, really the only advantages that he had over Jim Jordan was that he wasn't turning the flying monkeys onto his opponents, and he's basically an unknown.
Hang on, before we get into him, I just want to say a couple of things about Emma, because you might not have done the research on him, but I did.
Okay,
So
you did the reading in that 4-hour gap.
Yeah, just a couple of little interesting things about him. He was once considered the quintessential crazy Republican 10 years ago.
Yep.
He denied evolution.
Yep.
He tried to abolish the minimum wage. This is when he was a state rep. He tried to chemically castrate sex offenders.
Yeah.
I don't know if he personally tried to. I wouldn't be surprised. He wanted to declare federal laws as not applying in Minnesota. In a state parliament debate, he once froze up when he was asked how old he thought the earth was. Right? And despite being busted for drunk driving twice, he tried to reduce penalties for drunk driving. He is now...
That is classic first half of the 2010s Republicanism.
Yeah, totally.
Like, yeah.
But he's now considered a moderate, right? Even though he used to be this crazy person. Like when people wrote out, when cruel lefties wrote articles about insane right-wingers, Tom Emma was right up there, right? And, during the Tea Party era. And now, to be fair, he has moderated. He used to be famously anti-gay.
Yes.
And whereas now... Yeah, as you said, one of the knocks on him now is he voted for a same-sex marriage in 2022. So he has moderated. Another thing about him that is not well known, but I loved. I would have voted for Tom Emma just for this one thing alone. He's a passionate supporter of the national popular vote.
Yes, he is.
He's against electoral colleges.
Yeah.
What a champion.
Yeah.
And as you say, he voted to certify Joe Biden's election results. Trump, and you sort of, we talked about this on the show anyway, on Planet America anyway, and you did touch on it, but I'll just note that almost all the knocks on him, the real knocks on him were about Trump.
Yes.
About him not certifying the vote, him not endorsing Trump yet for 2024, him not, what else was, he told GOP candidates back in 2022 to distance themselves from Trump on the campaign trail, which Trump was offended by, even though that was absolutely correct.
Yep.
And in the Trump, the truth that Trump truthed out, the truth that Trump truthed out. That's a tongue twister for you. He said, I have many wonderful friends wanting to be Speaker of the House, and some are truly great warriors. Rhino Tom Emma, who I do not know well, is not one of them. He never respected the power of a Trump endorsement or the breadth and scope of MAGA, Make America Great Again. He fought me all the way.
Hang on, did he put Make America Great Again in brackets after
No,
MAGA?
not in brackets. It was like a dash, Make America Great Again. Exclamation mark. I should have said, Make America Great Again. He fought me all the way and actually spent more time defending Ilhan Omar than he did me. Now, I want to just focus on that. Okay. You might go, what is that about?
Did he actually spend more time defending Ilhan Omar than Trump?
He definitely did not. But I should explain what he's talking about.
Yes.
He's talking about back in 2019, where you might recall Trump at one point in time was bagging out the squad.
Yes.
And he tweeted, that's Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, those four lefty Congress people. And he tweeted out, why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came?
That's right.
Then come back and show us how it's done. Now, that made no sense for two of them who were born in America.
Yep.
In Ilhan Omar's case, she actually was born overseas.
Yeah.
Then at one of his rallies, when he started bagging out Ilhan Omar again, the rally started chanting, send her back, send her back. And that was a mild controversy at one point in time. People were going,
I vaguely remember this.
they shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
That's not nice. You shouldn't do that. And when they were doing send her back, the crowd, Trump paused for 10 seconds and then said, and listened to them and then said, I didn't say that. They did. Yeah, classic Trump, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, a number of Republicans criticized the send her back chant.
Yes, yeah,
It became quite controversial. One of them was Emma.
Ah, right.
This is how he did it. He said, there's not a racist bone in the president's body. What he was trying to say is that if you don't appreciate this country, you don't have to be here. But there's no place for send her back chance. I disagree with that completely.
Wow.
That was... Oh, yeah, and Trump, by the way, actually relented for once.
Yes, yeah.
He said he was not happy with the chant.
Oh, yeah.
And when asked why he didn't stop it, Trump said, I think I did. I started speaking very quickly, he says, even though he literally paused for 10 seconds. So anyway, so that was Emma's scathing criticism, which Trump still hasn't forgotten to this day. And he still hasn't forgiven him for. So that was all his sin. So I just want to share that with you all.
Yeah.
Keep on going now on Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Johnson was... He had the advantage of being basically an unknown.
Yep.
But he should not have been an unknown.
I think Republicans know him.
Yeah,
He was number 5 in their leadership.
Yes.
He was the deputy whip.
Yes,
And the top 4 had already
Yeah,
been
although
eliminated.
there were members of the Republican conference saying they had to Google him.
They don't know they're number 5.
Yeah. But the point is that he never had the kind of prominence that someone like Jim Jordan
Definitely
had,
not.
Which meant that one of the reasons why I think Republicans voted for him was they didn't think that he would make them completely toxic in the way that Jordan would have made them.
Which is true.
Well, it's true for now.
Yeah.
It's true for now. This is until everyone else started Googling him.
Yeah. He's got this.
To find out what
history.
his whole bag is. And
I got some
the
quotes coming.
First thing is he has not been in Congress for very long. He's
6 years?
He's only been there, since 2017. But the major thing that he has done in Congress was to play a big role in Republican attempts to overturn the 2020 election.
Yes.
Now, it's also worth mentioning he is yet another one of our constitutional lawyers.
He is.
So he worked for I think it's now known as the Alliance Defense Fund, which is, anti-LGBT, anti all kinds of other things.
Christian litigators.
Yeah, Christian litigators. Whether that qualifies him as a constitutional lawyer, I don't know. He definitely is a constitutional lawyer in the right-wing activist sense of trying to make blatantly constitutional things sound constitutional for fundraising purposes.
Unconstitutional things.
Yes, unconstitutional things.
Yes.
So he was whipping the Republicans, that is, he was gathering the support to get Republican signatures on the Texas amicus brief. Now, he got 120 Republican signatures on this, I think basically all of whom then went on to vote against certifying Biden's victory in Congress.
Just to be clear, when Dr. Dave says the Texas amicus brief...
I'm just about to explain what that was for those of you who have forgotten. So this was every serious legal challenge, not that any of them were really serious, had petered out by this point. This is December 10th when this gets filed. So it's 4 days before... all of the deadlines for the Electoral College. So, I mean, we're really getting into very long shot territory. So Ken Paxton, who was the Texas Attorney General, files this amicus brief, which other states joined, saying that because of the fact that Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, and I can't remember whether there were any other states that they were targeting. Georgia.
Yep.
Because of the fact
Wisconsin.
That various executives and state courts in these states had changed rules around the election, usually around extension of early voting and things like that, an extension of mail-in voting, that they had changed the rules of elections. The first of all, the argument was that was unconstitutional because they're relying on this theory that only state legislatures can set the rules of elections. We will get to that theory in a second. Okay. And they were saying that so because the states did these unconstitutional things, resulting in them voting for Biden, according to them, that meant an injury to the state of Texas, which had voted for Trump. Now, the Supreme Court dismissed this in less than a day.
Yes.
7-2. So the two, not surprisingly, were Alito and Thomas, but not even they actually really put up that much of a fight. Now, the reason they dismissed it was Texas did not have legal standing to bring this. Now, that might sound like some kind of technicality, and that's how the MAGA crowd depicted it as because Trump had referred to this as this is the big one. This is the one that is going to overturn the election results of the Supreme Court. Just says, no, we're not listening to this. You don't have standing to present it. So it was presented as this cruel kind of lawyerly technicality, but no, it wasn't just some minor technicality.
I mean, it's a technicality, but it's a fundamental technicality.
Yeah. Now, the fundamental technicality is that this election is organized, the presidential election is organized at the level of states.
Yeah.
States run their elections.
Yes.
This is something that the Republican Party is fundamentally committed to. They don't want any suggestion of nationalization of elections. So it's a bit weird when a Republican state goes there and says, my state has been injured by the way that you organized your elections. Now, more needs to be added on this point, one of which is that if you squinted at it, you could kind of see this argument that the voters of Texas had been injured by the fact that, they voted for Trump. But if you accepted their completely unacceptable argument that this was unconstitutional, then, okay, they didn't get their president because of the fact that these states changed the rules. But it wasn't that the voters of Texas had been injured. It was the state of Texas had been injured. The reason for that? Because the 11th Amendment to the Constitution, which dates back to 1794, limits the ability of out-of-state litigants to actually bring suit against states. So instead, they had to frame it as the state of Texas has been injured, which even Alan Dershowitz looked at that and said, oh, that one's a bit creative. I don't think that's going to work. Okay, so first of all, the Supreme Court very correctly just sort of batted it down. But there's a couple of other things that need to be mentioned. One is that they were actually seeking to nullify election results after the election based on these things that states had done before the election.
Yes.
That is, everybody recognizes that, or nearly everybody recognizes that as that's not how the law is supposed to work.
If you don't challenge it before the election,
exactly,
then you're just trying to second guess the result.
Which they weren't. They weren't challenging it before the election. They waited until after the election to challenge the result. And the thing is that these elections took place within the rules that had been determined by governors and secretaries of state and the courts. Even if they had done something unconstitutional, this would be punishing the voters who voted in good faith under those rules. Now, I think the best summary of this was a similar case was brought in Wisconsin to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. This was actually the challenge that got closest to succeeding because of Wisconsin's the makeup of Wisconsin's Supreme Court. It was only 4-3 that got rejected in Wisconsin. But the conservative judge who joined the three liberals, so they also wanted to nullify the results. I think there were 4 grounds, and 3 of them were to do with, supposedly changing the rules. Yeah, the conservative judge said, this is essentially the equivalent of calling a penalty after the game is over, right? So that's basically what it was. It was, it was just something that was completely outside of the rules of the game. So that in itself as well was just enough for this to be completely, really kind of unthinkable that it would actually be, that the Supreme Court would allow it. But then we come to the biggest issue of all, which is the theory that state legislators have basically unbridled control over elections. Now, that was shot down by the Supreme Court 6-3 earlier this year.
That's Moore versus Harper.
Yes, Moore versus Harper. And so it was Alito and Thomas, obviously, and Gorsuch joining them as well. Kavanaugh had previously expressed interest in this theory, and I think there's some speculation he might be open to a narrower interpretation of it. But they shot down this very broad interpretation. So Moore versus Harper was a case about redistricting in North Carolina, where the North Carolina State Supreme Court had shot down a gerrymandered map. And that was when, so they then took that to the Supreme Court and said, hey, this theory of legislative supremacy says it's legislators that get to decide who, how elections are run. What do you think about that? 6-3, the state Supreme Court said no. That doesn't rule out things like judicial review.
No.
Now, that was shooting. Admittedly, that was shooting down the broadest possible interpretation of the state supremacy theory. But I don't think that any version of the state supremacy theory that was coming out of this Texas amicus brief would have actually stood up.
I was going nowhere.
Had it happened. And we're not even getting into the issues about, like, would these rule changes actually have changed the result of the election? Because I think there's very little evidence that that it would have. But but anyway, it's not even an issue as far as the results of the election goes. So this is what our great constitutional lawyer and now Speaker of the House of Representatives was pushing. This was what he was whipping votes for, or whipping signatures for. And not only was he doing that, he was actually going on Louisiana radio. He was talking to a conservative radio host called Moon Griffin. And this is the thing that, everybody has picked up on the fact that he was presenting with this amicus brief, basically the most kind of, I won't call it legally plausible, but legally dignified version of Trump's arguments. You know, this lawsuit, it wasn't directly alleging fraud. It wasn't claiming that, voting machines were overturning the results. It wasn't claiming anything improper in the count. It was saying that changes to the rules had been unconstitutional. Okay, so this was the most sort of dignified bow tie version, if you like, version of Trump's legal challenges. But when he was talking to Moon Griffin, he just emptied the whole bag of this shit all over the microphone. He said, like, the Dominion voting machine fraud claims have a lot of merit. And yeah,
did he?
Yes, he did.
I didn't even know that.
Yes, yeah, yeah. He was pulling out all of this shit. I mean, he wasn't going full Sidney Powell. Like, we give him that. But he was because he was doing the thing of, as the days went on and on, as the days got shorter and the vote count got closer, he was clearly trying to give conservatives hope that there was that there was still a chance. So he staked a lot on this amicus brief. And then when that failed, he was still, we've still got Congress, right? Congress still has to approve it. Like, no, it doesn't. Congress's role is not to is to count the votes, not to actually approve them. But anyway, so then he was also behind the congressional effort.
Yeah.
He was the main whip.
He just used the same arguments.
Yeah. Behind the congressional effort. So that was why. Is it 140, whatever it was?
139 House Republicans.
Yeah. 139 House Republicans.
And 8 senators.
Yes. Yeah. So 147 times. Yeah, 139 House Republicans signed onto these challenges both before, that's Arizona, and after, that's Pennsylvania, the riot. Where they were chased out of the House of Representatives.
And 3/4 of those votes,
yes,
of the 139 House Republicans, specifically cited the court logic he used, not the Dominion stuff, but the independent.
No, he saved that one for Moon Griffin.
The independent state legislature stuff.
Yes,
they specifically cited that 3/4 of the 139 House Republicans as the reason why, because of course they couldn't be using the crazy Hugo Chavez stuff.
No.
Right? Because, no one bought that except for Sidney Powell and maybe Trump.
No.
But
I believe, though, that he actually mentioned Hugo Chavez.
Did he?
At one point. To Moon Griffin.
Oh, to Moon Griffin, sure.
Okay, while you keep going, let me check this one. Yeah.
But basically the role he played was to launder the crazy shit into smooth sounding shit that Congress people could get behind without being embarrassed. And the knock, I'm about to say some things about him at some point in time, which are more positive, to be honest. But without doubt, the biggest negative fear about Mike Johnson is that he has shown both an ability and a willingness to launder crazy shit.
Yes.
So that it becomes more amenable. He adds the spoonful of sugar to send the crazy medicine down your gullet. And so that's the concern that people have about him.
Yes.
Yeah, go on. What you got there
so
for
here we
Moon? By the way, can I just say, you know that you got highlighted the podcast whenever Dave starts thumping the table.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of thumping the table during Moon Griffin. So yeah, go on. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is from a Politico article.
Yes.
Now, okay, actually, it might not have been Moon Griffin, he told, might have been two other Louisiana radio hosts.
Yeah, he was the talkback host as well, by the way.
Yeah. So by
part of
November
fraternity.
17, 2020, Johnston told two Louisiana radio hosts that the election was not over, that Trump didn't think so either. I don't concede anything, he said. I've talked to the president in the last few days and he is still dug in on this. Johnston then ran through a litany of allegations of election law changes in key states that he said were unconstitutional, and then he lent credence to a discredited claim of election fraud. The allegations about these voting machines, some of them being rigged with the software by Dominion, look, there's a lot of merit to that. In the same interview, Johnston, who as Speaker will be privy to the nation's most sensitive intelligence secrets, there's a little editorial aside from Politico there, returned to the Dominion matter. He embraced the false description of Dominion's machines as a software system that is used all around the country that is suspect because it came from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela. So he actually, most of them did not go that far down the Dominion hole.
He was committed.
But he really did. Now, I want to talk about like the mildest of silver linings to all of this. Mm-hmm. This certainly wouldn't have qualified as something that I was thankful for. Mm-hmm. Like a couple of days ago, we successfully got a possum out of our roof.
Yes.
Because we had actually blocked up the entrances in the roof, or the roofers had, but then we discovered that a possum was actually trapped in there, so we had to remove a fan vent and put the possum guy put a trap on the floor, and in the middle of the night it came, and I woke up the next morning and there's this possum in the cage, and releasing the possum into the backyard, into a tree. That was inspirational. That's something I'm thankful for. I was thinking about that as I was cleaning up the possum shit that was all over my bathroom floor. I thought, I'm thankful for this. So I'm far more thankful for the possum shit than I am for what I'm just about to say.
Yes.
Okay, but the silver lining is Johnston is so inexperienced in this job, which is difficult for people to do even when they have a huge amount of experience. Okay, so going back to Politico, one of Paul Ryan's staffers had an article in it yesterday about how when Paul Ryan took up the speakership, and he'd been in the House for something like 14 years by that point, he was lost at sea. He completely relied on Kevin McCarthy, who was House Majority Leader. Johnston is going to. Lost at sea is not going to be a good description. He's not going to be able to find his way onto the boat in the first place. So who's he going to rely on? Scalise. Yeah, he's not going to be relying on Jordan, who has equally little experience. He's going to be relying on Scalise, who I think Scalise described Johnston as my brother from Louisiana.
There you go.
Now, this isn't necessarily a good thing, but it's a better thing than Johnston following his own instincts on stuff or following Jim Jordan's instincts. So if there's any silver lining, it's the fact that this is, in some senses, actually the Scalise speakership that Republicans wanted the first time around.
Okay. Let me first just tell you it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Because another thing that was floated on the day that he was voted in was not just empowering McHenry as the temporary to become permanent.
Yeah.
But also Kevin McCarthy started floating a plan that would reinstall him as a speaker and make Jim Jordan the assistant speaker.
Oh, God.
He created a position called the assistant speaker, which doesn't exist.
Wow.
So
but it's like
Jim Jordan.
Assistant wrestling coach.
Yeah, it's kind of like second prize in a beauty contest in Monopoly.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah, so it could have been worse. But okay, I'm gonna you've missed a whole negative. I'm gonna give this negative, and then I'm gonna start the positives.
Yes.
I got a few positives.
You got a few positives.
I got a few positives.
Yeah.
You may or may not acknowledge these positives.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna try my luck.
Yeah.
Okay. The negative which you've missed is just how crazily fundamentalist.
Oh yeah. No, sorry. I didn't mean to overlook that. Yeah.
Like Like, he really, really, really didn't used to like the gays.
No. So I'm sure he still doesn't.
Back in 2003/4, like
Yes.
back then when it was acceptable to say anything about gay people, he took that license.
Yep.
And he wrote some very unfortunate editorials in his local Shreveport, Louisiana paper. And he was young then too. And he was a young guy saying some pretty way out shit. Let me read you some of that pretty way out shit.
All right.
He called homosexuality inherently unnatural, a dangerous lifestyle that would lead to legalized pedophilia and possibly even destroy the entire democratic system. Let me give you some more quotes. Homosexual relationships are inherently unnatural. The studies clearly show are ultimately harmful and costly for everyone.
The studies.
The studies, they clearly show.
Yeah.
Society cannot give its stamp of approval to such a dangerous lifestyle. If we change marriage for this
Studies from the Rod Dreher Institute of believing everything that you see on Twitter tell us very clearly.
Very clearly.
Yes.
Very clearly. If we change marriage for this tiny modern minority, we will have to do it for every deviant group. Polygamists, polyamorous, pedophiles, and others will be next in line to claim equal protection. They already are. There will be no legal basis to deny a bisexual the right to marry a partner of each sex of traditional marriage, or a person to marry his pet. Loss of this status will de-emphasize the importance of traditional marriage to society, weaken it, and place our entire democratic system in jeopardy by eroding its foundation. And this is my favorite quote. It's from another article. This is after the Janet Jackson Super Bowl controversy, when she showed a bit of her breast with Justin Timberlake. If you were shocked by the moral lapses this is a 30-year-old man saying, if you were shocked by the moral lapses at the Super Bowl, you ain't seen nothing yet. Experts project that homosexual marriage is the dark harbinger of chaos and sexual anarchy that could doom even the strongest republic.
Wow. Well, look,
that's what experts project.
There's definitely projection going on there. I wouldn't necessarily call it projection of expertise, but it's projection.
I missed that study, I must say. So anyway, so that's part of what's wonderful about him. But I want to get into the actual positives. Well, they may not turn out to be positives, but I've been looking around.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, I like that he's low profile.
Yep.
That is a good thing because this Congress is divided into posers and legislators. And he's clearly not one of the posers.
Okay.
So that is a good thing. He's not Matt Gaetz. He's not. One of the reasons that people don't know him is because he doesn't turn up on Fox News all the time.
Yeah.
That is a good thing.
Yes.
Okay. He can't do much as speaker in this next year, right? Like he can't legislate what the experts said about gay people.
Yes.
Right? He can't do that.
No.
All he needs to do is keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And I see evidence that he will be able to do that.
Yes.
And I will tell you why. Mm-hmm. First of all, he put out a plan to pass the budget before he got elected.
Yes.
I mean before the Republican vote, not before the House vote. Okay. Yeah. And it's an ambitious and I think impossible plan.
Yeah.
But importantly, part of the plan was that he said if he can't do it in 3 weeks, we need an extension until January the 15th or April the 15th, whatever it takes to get that budget passed. They voted for him knowing that.
Yes.
He gave it to them. So no one is going to oppose another extension. Yeah. Right? He's not going to get the McCarthy treatment for another extension. No. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
That means no shutdown.
Or there will be people who oppose it, but they're not going to depose him as the speaker.
Totally.
As a result, and they're not going to have the numbers to stop it. Yeah.
Totally. So that's a good thing.
Yes.
Okay. Because we don't need to go through this shit every month or two, right? That's the first thing that I think is good. I believe he will avoid a shutdown.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll see how good his plan is because the first part is to pass the energy appropriations bill and the water appropriations bill this week. So let's see. Let's see if he gets even close to one of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? But anyway, regardless, I think he'll get the extension he wants.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. Secondly, I put on quite a song and dance about how Jordan was a legislative dunce. He'd never passed a bill.
Yeah.
I went through all these measures of legislative effectiveness and how shit he was. I just ran Johnston through the same process. The results are very different.
Okay.
Jordan had never passed a bill in 16 years.
Yeah.
Johnson's been around for 6 years and he's passed 4 bills.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years alone, he's sponsored 15 substantive bills. 2 of them passed and became law in a Democratic House. I mean, the first 2 years when Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker, he had 2 laws passed in a Democratic House.
Yeah.
That is not Jim Jordan.
No.
Right, so he can work with Democrats. Yes, he is extremely right on the as far as social conservative, but he can clearly put that away when he needs to work with the other side.
Yes,
which is what you need to do as Speaker.
Yes.
And Jim Jordan could not do that.
No.
Okay. Even in his first 2 years under Trump, the first 2 years of his House career, he sponsored 15 bills with 2 of them passing and becoming law. The other 2 years, by the way, he did very little. He sponsored 12, none of them got up.
Yep.
But that was the last 2 years of Trump, and that was just a devastation zone, right? Yep. Do you recall the Center for Effective Lawmaking, which I cited? Yes. Their measure of how effective a legislator is, not just on the bills they pass, but the bills they try to pass, the bills they shepherd through, their work, their actual solid work.
Yes.
Jim Jordan was in the bottom 5 in Congress,
yes.
right?
Yep.
He was not good. Okay, let me tell you about Johnson's numbers on that.
Yep.
His score from the Center for Effective Lawmaking in the last Congress, so that's the one Nancy Pelosi was, that's one the Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for.
Yep.
He had 1.134 was his score. The average is a 1. So he was above average in a Democratic administration sweep.
Yes.
He was still above average. Okay. His DW nominate score, which is the partisanship, is actually slightly more moderate than Jordan. It's about the same as Kevin McCarthy. It's in the middle of the caucus. So it's not way out, even though he's got some way out views.
Yes.
He doesn't vote way out.
No.
And his vote view ideology rankings is 82nd most conservative member in the House. So he's right in the middle of the Republicans, as opposed to Jordan, who was 20th, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is 9th.
Yes.
And I said that on the show, and John made the point, I want to know the 8 people who are more conservative than Marjorie Taylor Greene. But anyway, he has said that he's a believer in a small role of the Speaker.
Yep.
Like he said, quote, the job of the Speaker of the House is to serve the whole body, and I will, but I made a commitment to my colleagues here. This Speaker's office is going to be known for decentralising the power. My office is going to be known for members being more involved and having more influence in our processes, in all the major decisions that are made here, for predictable processes and regular order.
My theory is most of his conference doesn't want to be more involved.
Quite possibly.
That cuts into time that they could be on Fox News or...
Sure.
On Twitter motivating death threats.
And they always say that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to follow through.
Yeah.
But, it's a nice thing to hear. Because the Speaker's office is too powerful, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Okay, so the fact that he is such an effective lawmaker in terms of getting bills up, and he clearly can work with the other side, tells me he probably does have the skills.
Yes.
Maybe not the experience, but he has the skills to be a potentially effective Speaker, to get a budget up at the very least, which is all he needs to do. So that is, I think, and that's the reason why I'm not saying that I'm going to love the guy. I'm just saying I think that I'm quite optimistic that he may do the job that he has to do, especially given he's now owned by Matt Gaetz and all those other guys who voted for him.
Yes.
So they're not going to turn on him very quickly, because that will be a mistake on that. That will be admitting error if they do that.
Yeah.
So I reckon, we'll see. The election tonight thing ain't great.
No, it's not. But by the way, he, as Speaker of the House, it's not like he then has a lot of control over the next election.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing that's a potential negative, if you care about this, is Ukraine. He is very not a fan of Ukraine.
Yes,
funding.
although he was quite a fan a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Well, they all were a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And look, he may go with the polls because it's still 55-35 according to Navigator in favour of same military aid.
And Biden
Republicans
is very
40-52.
aggressively tying this issue to Israel as well. Yeah.
He is. But he made a point of saying we stand with our ally Israel during a press conference, but not mentioning Ukraine. So anyway, we'll see about that. So that's my sort of a little bit of rainbow for you. Does that Sound reasonable?
Yeah. Look, it does sound reasonable. Okay. Yep.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yes.
We'll see. We'll find it real fast. I want to do a bit of a PS on this topic as well, which is credit to McHenry, the temporary speaker.
Yeah.
Who, once again, like Emma, had the opportunity to
Yes.
take extra power when it looked like
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a complete disaster.
Yes,
The
yeah.
Schmozzle. At any point in time, he could have. There's no law saying that he can't take extra power and be like a proper speaker.
Yes.
The law is extremely unclear. But he just refused to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he didn't want to set a precedent for an unelected speaker to abuse the role
Yes.
down the track. And
Yeah,
good on him.
He did make one dick move, though.
What's that?
So the former Speaker of the House, not by any rule, but by custom, has
The room, yeah.
has an office, has quite a spacious office, close to the to the Speaker's office, and he summarily evicted Nancy Pelosi from that office when she was out in California mourning Dianne Feinstein. This is a bit of an out of the ordinary move, as was widely pointed out. Dennis Hastert got to hold on to his office until he was sent to prison for child molestation. So, yeah.
There is some suggestion that it was Kevin McCarthy who pushed him to do that.
Yeah, probably.
But no, fair enough.
Yes.
And that's a great sting about Dennis
Yes.
Hastert.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about the speaker?
No.
Okay, we have taken up almost the entire podcast on this.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
So,
it
looks great.
This has taken up basically my entire brain.
and that's fair enough. This is the big topic right now, and I'm just angry because I want to do Biden, Missouri.
No, Chaz, I don't think we're going to get
I'm
to
going to
it.
have to put it off again. Okay, so let's go Stats Nugget. Stats Nugget. I've thrown a few of them,
Yes.
but I'll do one quickly. This is from the CBO. Now, you might recall a couple of years back.
Congressional Budget Office.
Thank you very much, Dave. I should really do that. You're right. You might recall I got in a little bit of trouble from friend of the podcast, Marco Fante, who has disappeared. Where are you, Marco? Come back on our Facebook page. Who is an economics guy. He's an economics lecturer at a university, which I don't want to dox him. I was making all kinds of projections about deficits a few years back.
Yes.
And he was going, you cannot do that.
Yes, yeah.
Extremely hard to calculate all
Yes,
the rest of it.
yeah. He was right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now I've got just some CBO numbers for you here.
Okay, yes.
All right, okay. These are not my projections.
Yep. We've had enough projections for today. I
That's
think.
right. Yeah, for experts have done their projecting.
Yeah.
CBO estimates that that America's paying $711 billion in net interest this fiscal year. That's more than double the interest payments for the previous year. 1/3 of the debt has a maturity of a year or less, and 53% has a maturity of 3 years or less, which means that that's going to get rolled over very soon, and it will then incur a much higher interest rate because interest rates are much higher now.
Yes.
Which means get ready for them to pay a lot more interest on their debt.
Yes.
The result of this is that more than half of the budget deficit over the next decade, I'm sorry, this is an expert projection from the CBO though, more than half of the budget deficit over the next decade is expected to result purely from higher interest payments. The budget deficit is going to average about 6% of GDP through 2033, with 3.1 points of that from interest payments on the debt.
Right, yes.
The historical average for deficits is 3.6%.
I was going to say, yes. Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems like almost exactly. The average is usually about half that, and it's just been doubled because of interest rate.
Exactly.
Yep.
We haven't seen deficits of more than 5.5% for more than 5 years in a row since at least 1930.
Yeah.
And we're about to.
So not even during the Second World War.
No.
When the Second World War consumed about 40% of American GDP, but even then, they were not running. Wow.
Yeah, and this is a real experts project because it's 2033, but this is the CBO again.
Yep.
In 2033, interest payments are projected to cost an estimated $1.4 trillion.
Right.
And it could obviously be higher.
Yes.
Might be lower.
Yep.
But could be higher. That's a stats nugget. Do you have anything to add to that?
No.
No? Okay, so don't blame me. Blame the CBO if you don't like that. It's, okay, and now I've got a great little toilet break. This clip is from June this year.
Okay.
I was working on what the FAQ at that point in time, so I didn't see it until now.
Yep.
And I want to share it with you just in case you haven't seen it, 'cause I love it.
Okay.
One of Trump's favorite policies is the death penalty for drug dealers. It's been a long-term policy since the 80s,
Yes.
since before he was a politician, right? He pushed it in 2016. Now he's pushing it again, except now he's got DeSantis egging him on because DeSantis is trying to outflank Trump on the right, obviously, and he's accusing Trump of being soft on crime because Trump passed the First Step Act, which I'm sure he regrets now. That was Jared Kushner's idea. But it was a good act.
Yeah,
he should be proud.
Yeah.
It was one of his greatest achievements as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, it was a modest act. The First Step Act expanded re-entry and job training opportunities for federal inmates. It banned the shackling of pregnant prisoners. That didn't seem like a bad thing to ban.
Yeah.
It required prisoners to be located within 500 miles of their families when possible. Sounds like a good idea. It reduced some mandatory minimum sentences. You could still sentence them more, just not mandatory minimum, that's all. And it expanded judges' discretion to offer lower sentences if they wanted to. It made reductions of crack cocaine sentences under the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 apply retroactively to before 2010. That doesn't seem unreasonable.
No, not at all.
And it worked. Recidivism rate of the 9,791 people who were released early under the First Step Act was 16%. That is, 16% were rearrested. You might go, huh? 16%? That's horrible. Do you know what the standard recidivism rate is for prisoners? It's 43%.
That's right.
So that was actually a triumph.
Yes.
Right there, right? But Ron DeSantis called it a jailbreak bill and said it has allowed dangerous people out of prison who have now reoffended and really, really hurt a number of people. He says he's going to
That's an uncharitable way to talk about Steve Bannon.
He says he wants to repeal it. So now Trump's pushing hard this death penalty for drug dealers thing, right?
Yeah.
Bit of a contradiction because he's been attacking Biden for years now about Biden pushing legislation to pass throwing drug criminals in jail.
Yes, yeah.
And you might recall he loves touting Alice Johnson, who got released under the First Step Act.
Yep.
She's a drug dealer who got released and has been a great success. Anyway, he sat down for an interview back in June with Brett Baer. And Brett Baer, shall we say, exposed the contradictions somewhat. And this is it.
I focused on nonviolent crime. As an example, a woman who you know very well was in jail. She had 24 more years to serve. She served for 22 years. She had
Alice Johnson.
Alice.
She was in the Super Bowl.
High quality. Oh, yeah. I said, how many years? And she was on a telephone call, and they were involved in selling marijuana, mostly marijuana. And she got like 50 years in jail.
But she'd be killed under your plan.
Huh?
As a drug dealer.
No. Under that, it would depend on the severity. It would depend on the severity.
She's technically a former drug dealer. She had multi-million-dollar cocaine ring.
Any drug dealer, look.
So even Alice Johnson in that ad.
She can't do it, okay? By the way, if that was there, no, she wouldn't be killed. It would start as of now, so you wouldn't go to the past.
I know, but your policy.
No, they're starting now, yeah.
It's just starting now, Dave. It's just starting now. I love that. So anyway, have you seen that before?
I had not seen that before, no.
I think that's beautiful.
No.
Okay, so we've now got up to the point where I was going to talk about Israel and then gradually work our way into Biden, Missouri. I might as well get some Israel stuff out before we run out of time. Okay, let's see. Okay, you know what? I'm going to skip past. I've got a few polls here. We might come back to it. We'll say. Okay, so a few things I want to talk about. First of all, I just want to point to, I've got a gift article from The Atlantic.
Yep.
Because I constantly try and recommend articles from The Atlantic and people can't read them. This one I want you all to read. I'm putting a gift link in the blurb in our show notes. It will be both in the blurb of the podcast and in the blurb of the Facebook and the YouTube. Go to it, click on it, you'll be able to read it. It is the best article I've seen about how shit the settlers have been on the West Bank.
Okay.
It's a really, really, really good article from Graham Wood, who was there.
Yes, yeah.
And I would strongly recommend you read it because it really brings out the huge issue, which doesn't get talked about enough. Like we're focused on Gaza.
Yes.
But once Gaza's over, this crap is still happening on the West Bank.
Yes.
And so please read that. I also want to add an answer to my Qatar question from last week when I was saying, why don't I ever talk about Qatar? Qatar funds Hamas more than Iran does. Qatar is where the Hamas leaders are chilling and kicking back at the moment. Okay, this is the answer to the Qatar question. Qatar is home to the Al Udeid Air Base, which is America's hub for for their war campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the biggest military base in the Middle East. America likes that base very much. Qatar also financed the building of and largely funds the maintenance of the base at Al Udeid. Yet it allows the US to operate the facility as if it were sovereign American territory, which they also like very much, because then they can do whatever they like there.
Yes.
Right? Neither Egypt nor Turkey wants to be a go-between with Hamas.
Yes.
But Qatar is prepared to, so they can negotiate hostage releases on behalf of America. And if we're talking about ceasefires, it's going to have to come through Qatar because America ain't going to be talking to Hamas themselves, and no one else will. So it's Qatar, and not to mention they also spend tens of millions of dollars on lobbying. So in short, Qatar is Littlefinger? The guy from Game of Thrones? Littlefinger? That's what Qatar is. That's the reason why. So that's the answer to the question.
Yes.
Qatar. Okay.
And there are some other important factors as well, like Al Jazeera.
Oh, yeah. That's a pretty big factor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked
Sorry, for those of you who are wondering, why did I just say the name of a TV station?
Go in there. Go.
Al Jazeera is owned by the Qatari royal family.
Indeed.
Yes.
And it wouldn't. And it would not look good if America shut down the voice of the Middle East.
That's right, it's one of these things that always gets put on the table. I remember, 20 years ago during the Iraq War, there was always suggestions that Al Jazeera was basically an enemy broadcaster, and that, the idea that the US should ban Al Jazeera was one of the milder proposals that was being put forth, during the Iraq War. There were some commentators suggesting the United States should bomb Al Jazeera as an enemy facility, but Al Jazeera, fueled by Qatari money, I'm not saying that as a pejorative thing, I'm just saying that's the reality of how it has become so big, has become an incredibly important feature of global media infrastructure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also we talked a little bit about the hospital bombing that was originally moved by the New York Times and many papers as being by Israel and
whenever the New York Times talks about this now, they admit their mistake in every single article.
Yeah. It's pretty hard to escape it.
Yes. Yeah. That's the kind of contrition I want to see.
Yeah.
We didn't get that from the Iraq War.
Yeah. Now, at the time I said the evidence that I'd seen so far, I thought made me more likely to lean towards the Israeli side of things.
Yes.
Since then, there's been a lot more evidence. So I just want to just count just quick, because this has been such a big story. I just want you to know.
Yes.
Because there's so much misinformation out there. ABC News says America. The ABC News America security analyst Mick Mulroy, who was formerly Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, a CIA officer and a US Marine, said, quote, "The explosion is consistent with a rocket that still had a lot of rocket fuel at the time of impact." Also for ABC News, Eric Olerich, retired Navy commander, said the main post-explosion signature is that of fire. All of the cars are burned. This is consistent with a rocket full of fuel that has been knocked out of a straight line trajectory.
Right.
There was there's some people were speculating about an explosion in midair, which could be an Israeli munition. CNN ruled that out. They said they ruled out an airburst bomb. Because the CNN experts said that they would have done more top-down shrapnel damage to the cars in the area.
Right.
And there wasn't so much of that. The cars got hit, but the roof not as much as you would expect. And then there was the New York Times jumped in here with this one. They noted that it was a bit suspicious that all traces of the munition had seemingly vanished from the site of the blast, making it impossible to assess its provenance.
Yes.
CNN spoke with Mark Alasko, who's a war crimes investigator for the UN. He says, quote, "There's always a piece of bomb after the fact. In 20 years of investigating war crimes, this is the first time I haven't seen any weapon remnants, and I've worked 3 wars in Gaza." So that is suspicious, because obviously the only people who could control the ground there is Hamas. Al Jazeera had a theory that an Iron Dome missile might have hit one of the rockets.
Yep, I saw that.
Admiral Hurgari from the IDF, he denied it. He said they don't fire missiles into the Gazan airspace. Now, the reason I'm quoting him, you might go, why are you quoting the IDF? They're not neutral. The reason I cite him is because it does make sense to me that you wouldn't fire missiles into the Gazan airspace because you need time to track the missile. And so it makes much more sense that you'll get it when it's on its way down than rather than it's on its way up, right? Also, it's just a matter of time.
But Iron Dome, for those of you not familiar with is the Israeli air defense system that shoots down missiles.
Yes, yeah. Also, he said that about 20% of missiles from Gaza fall in Gaza. So there's no point hitting them there anyway because a lot of them fall out of the sky in Gaza. He said more than 550 rockets launched by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad during this war have failed. Now, you can believe that or not. I want to tell you what US intelligence had to say because they came back with a bunch of anonymous quotes to various organizations. We assess with high confidence that Israel was not responsible for the explosion at the hospital and that Palestinian militants were responsible. The damage at the hospital was consistent with what we would expect to see from a rocket and inconsistent with the larger craters and broader blast effects that we would expect to see from an airdrop munition or an artillery round. They agreed that there was no indication that Israel shot the rocket down with the Iron Dome. So they agreed with the IDF spokesperson on that. They also agreed that Hamas rockets fail a lot. They agree with that as well. Another quote, our conclusion is that there was a catastrophic motor failure that likely occurred which separated the motor and the warhead. The warhead landed in the hospital compound and that was a second explosion and a much bigger one because there was a different explosion which most people haven't talked about as well. There were two explosions. They disagreed though with Israel on who did it, or rather they didn't confirm with Israel. We assess with low confidence that Palestine Islamic Jihad was responsible for launching the rocket that landed on the hospital. So only low confidence, whereas Israel were very confident. The US officials said they did intercept communications from suspected Hamas terrorists that indicated that Palestinian Islamic Jihad was responsible for launching the rocket, but they were different communications to the ones that Israel released publicly.
Right.
They did not try to confirm Israel's communications. Okay, so that is the evidence which I think is worth noting, which I just want to throw out there. Okay. What this does, though, is I think this shows us the way forward for news, and I think this is worth raising. I want to know what your thought is on this. Because I was throwing one other random thing. There's been a few times where the community notes have been wrong. Like people have talked about community notes on Twitter. Oh, okay. Obviously, you disagree, but that is something that gets talked about a lot. There's like a crowdsourcing Wikipedia style thing happening on Twitter, where people with the community notes, and they do correct a lot of people with good corrections, but they make mistakes. Like there was a Taylor Swift bodyguard story where Taylor Swift's bodyguard went to fight for Israel, and the community notes said that story was not true. He never worked for Taylor Swift. Turned out he did work for Taylor Swift. The community note. Not just was the community note wrong, but the community note, when you actually clicked on the link, the link didn't say what the community note said it did. So it was a massive failure, right?
You know a better way of avoiding misinformation?
How's that?
Don't go on Twitter.
Probably. Well, you avoid all information, misinformation and information. But this is where I'm going. I think the future of news is less reporting and more curating, because I think we don't need reporting. There's more reporting than ever out there. First-hand reports of things that supposedly happened.
Yes, yeah.
Right? We can't get enough reporting at the moment. It's everywhere. But most of it's bullshit. And what we need is an organization to help working out what is bullshit and what's not. And I'm talking about fact-checking. I'm talking about narrative checking. I'm talking about, is this evidence, is this actually, is this real footage? Is this when
isn't this what Bellingcat does?
Well, yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all.
I think Bellingcat's great, but I'm not sure if that's like the future.
But I'm saying that I think that at one point, I'm rather than doing for one thing every now and then. If you have an organization that did that for everything, for every story. Go like their contribution to the story was going, okay, Speaker of the House, people say this. Well, actually, this is the case, and this is the case, and you go there for a curation of the news.
Yes.
I think that would be extremely successful and very, very, very useful.
Yes.
And I think it's going to get more useful over time because I think our problems are going to only get worse.
Can I just ask, who's got the commercial incentive to do this?
I think people would pay for it.
I'm not sure. I think something like that would require some very, very deep-pocketed patron.
Yeah, maybe.
People would pay for it, not in the numbers that they pay for bullshit.
Well, I think, okay, let's put it this way. who pays the subscription for the New York Times, I think they'll pay subscription to this one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like that's a reasonable number of people, but I don't know in terms of the whole future of news. I'm not confident.
Okay. Oh, fair enough. Just throwing it out there.
Like, I think it's a good idea. Yeah. I think a massively scaled up Bellingcat because, there is more, facility than ever for anybody potentially to be a reporter if they happen to be nearby something and, and have a phone handy. And that's the whole idea of this sort of open source reporting. As you say, most of it is bullshit. The good example of that I saw today was that there was this report on the two initial news sources that Musk promoted, both of which claimed to be aggregating open source reporting. They were one of them turned out to be a teenager in the southwest of London who had a history of amplifying very anti-Semitic material. Although this person claims he's not that London teenager. He's a guy in Lebanon who is just using his relative's credit card, who's a teenager. Yeah, apparently. And then there was another was someone who's in the US military but has a long history of amplifying pro-Russian material.
They can't trust them. Who can you trust?
So this is what Elon Musk was promoting as like the as citizen journalism. I mean, I was just going to say in response to that, I don't think that there is. I mean, the cutbacks to foreign correspondents and foreign bureaus of major news organizations. I'm not sure if there actually is a substitute for that. And I kind of think that if those were around now, they actually would be able to do a lot of that kind of curation that you were talking about with the resources of major news organizations behind them. I don't think we can rely on because, as I say in theory, the idea that, yes, there's potentially all of this information that is out there to be had. But it's like, in the current environment, Luke O'Neill, who, as I said before, his Substack, Welcome to Hell World, is something I rely on quite a lot. He was talking about during recent natural disasters in the US, he's gone onto Twitter to try to get an idea of what's going on because Twitter used to be really useful for that because there were always people in the vicinity of these natural disasters who were, pumping out this raw footage of what was happening. He said, doctored image after doctored image of sharks swimming down streets.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the commercial incentive is. It's not a huge amount of money that people make out of it. It's trivial amounts of money, but it's something. If you get 1.6 billion people to look at your dumb picture of a shark swimming down the street, you might get $16,000 out of that.
But that's the commercial incentive that Elon Musk is creating for people.
Yes,
with his new system, his new wonderful system.
Yeah.
It does remain to be seen that you can commercialize this.
Yeah.
And to be fair, but to be honest, this is something that I've tried to do on Planet America for a long time. Like, there's actually I'm not a journalist. I just curate what I see, what I read. I have no reporting. All I do is just go, this makes sense. This makes sense. This is bullshit. Whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean to someone to do it properly, not like me. I mean, with real resources and whatever.
Yes.
Anyway. Okay. And the last story I want to talk about is the for one of their words, the cancel culture going on in America about this issue, which I think is worth noting.
Yes.
The classic example is a story from Harvard, right, where a coalition of Palestine solidarity groups co-authored a letter saying, "We, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence." This was like on day one.
Yes,
It was real early, right? They talked about apartheid, Israeli apartheid, and then they said, "The coming days will require a firm stand against colonial retaliation. We call on the Harvard community to take action to stop the ongoing annihilation of Palestinians." Okay. Possibly a controversial view, but fine. Like this well within the bounds of free speech, you would have thought. But then Bill Ackman, CEO of Pershing Square Capital Management, wrote that a dozen business leaders wanted Harvard to release the names of the students who belong to the organizations that signed the Hamas letter, so the Harvard letter, so as to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. The names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. He says that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. You hear that a lot. And firms shouldn't be hiring people whose values don't match the firm's values. What say you, Dave? You work at a uni?
First of all, why are these stories always about Harvard and Stanford and, this handful of the most elite universities? I'm going to get to, in just a second, a story from Florida, from two state universities in Florida that I think is actually a lot more serious than this.
Okay.
But no, I don't agree with this action from Pershing Capital at all. And it actually gets to a rarely made point about freedom of speech, which is the biggest restrictions on freedom of speech do not come from governments. They come from employers.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever worked in any job has encountered restrictions of freedom of speech from employers.
They certainly have.
Yeah, that's all the way up from retail to major media organisations.
Yes.
And if there's one service that this has done, it's to remind us of where the real threat to free speech actually comes from. It's from employers. It's not from, governments can and do threaten free speech in all kinds of ways, but generally, in terms of ways that actually affect people's lives, it's kind of rare that someone gets, that someone in the United States or Australia gets some kind of significant punishment handed down for free speech. On the other hand, punishment from employers, that is meted out all the time. And I think that this is a very important thing to keep in mind, that is where that's where the threat to free speech really actually comes from.
I think that's great.
If that's what you care about.
I'm just going to make a couple of quick points and then I want to hear about your Florida case.
Yes.
It was organisations that signed the letter.
Yes.
Not students.
No.
It's not like they hidden student signatures.
No,
there
no.
were no student signatures.
Yes.
Okay? The students might not have known.
Yep.
Many said they did not know.
No.
Number two, how many weird clubs were you a part of at uni? I was a member of about 50 of them.
Were you part of the creative anachronists?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
They're the guys that dress up like Middle Ages fight squads.
Yeah, you were probably on the wrong side of the English Civil War.
I probably was.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. It's, this is what happens at uni. You join weird clubs.
Yes.
They might say weird things that you got nothing to do with you. That's what clubs do. Even if they did know. Let's say they did know. They're just college kids.
Yes.
Their values. He's talking about their values. Their values haven't been formed yet.
That's true.
They are in the process of working out their values, and the way you do that is by trying shit out.
Yeah.
It is bullshit to punish people for life who are just working out what they think right now, And
if ever was disqualified for edgy shit that they got into in college, then our parliaments and halls of Congress would be emptied out.
Well, look, let me tell you right now that if people were held to what they did at uni, there would not have been a single heterosexual woman who came out of Sydney Uni in the mid-90s. They were all lesbians. At least they were when I asked them out. People, when they try shit when they're at uni, that's okay.
Yes.
That's good. Let them work out who they are, right? Who cares what some student group at Harvard thinks anyway? Who gives a toss? Must we always raise the stakes of inconsequential views? You're still loving the lesbian thing.
I love the line, must we always raise the stakes of inconsequential views?
True.
That could be the motto of this podcast, except it's not as concise as let's get peppy, but yes.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try that in
must
future.
Must we always raise the stakes of inconsequential views?
I'm going to try that, see how that sounds in future.
Yeah.
If universities, obviously where people are supposed to try out new ideas, if they're punished for bad ideas at uni, there's literally no chance of people trying anything controversial ever.
No.
And also it's hypocritical. He wants their names. He talked about a dozen CEOs. Who the fuck are those CEOs?
Yes,
How come you want to know their names, but we can't know the CEOs' names?
That's right.
Sorry, I get a bit angry, but I'm actually really annoyed.
Yeah,
at
the
this.
same people who claim commercial confidentiality when they are asked any question at all about the fucking dodgy shit that they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
no.
I thought we were supposed to be worried about cancel culture anyway. How is this
Yes.
not cancel culture?
Yeah, no,
and especially they always go, cancel culture at unis. Well, what's this?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so let me ask you just one question and then
Yes.
you finish off.
Yeah.
Is there any line at all? And I'll give you an example.
Yep.
Gemma De Cristo, who is an assistant professor, not a student, an assistant professor, an assistant professor, Dave, of American Studies undergraduate faculty advisor. She tweeted out, one group of people we have easy access to in the US is all these Zionist journalists who spread propaganda and misinformation. They have houses with addresses, kids in school. They can fear their bosses, but they should fear us more. Knife emoji, axe emoji, blood emoji, blood emoji, blood emoji. Should there be consequences for that? Or
Yeah,
not?
that's like a criminally actionable threat.
I agree.
That's
There you go.
yeah.
So there's your limit. When the people are actually inciting violence, then go for it. Dave, what was your example?
Okay, so in Florida, Ron DeSantis has ordered a crackdown on a pro-Palestinian group called Students for Justice in Palestine, which has chapters at the University of Florida and University of South Florida. So in Florida, these are all under the one university system. So they've ordered colleges to shut down that organisation.
Yes.
Now, the reason for it was, so the president of the system said, based on the national SJP's support of terrorism, in consultation with Governor DeSantis, the student chapters must be deactivated. So his title is the Chancellor. This is Ray Rodriguez. Now, okay, what was this support of terrorism that they're talking about? This was an open letter that they wrote saying, referring to the massacres in southern Israel that were committed by Hamas by the name that Hamas had used, which was Operation Alexa...
Flood or something? No.
Alexa something, yeah.
Sorry, I think it was flood.
I just tried and failed to actually find the letter. Anyway, they said they referred to this as an act of resistance, and they said students in exile in Palestine are not in solidarity. Sorry, students in exile from Palestine, talking about Palestinian students in the US, are not in solidarity with the resistance. They are the resistance. To which the DeSantis administration said, see, they're saying they're terrorists. They said it. They said this act was resistance. They're part of the resistance. Therefore, they admitted it. They're terrorists. This is just fucking childish, right? This is willfully misreading a statement which feel free to disagree with that statement. But to say that is tantamount to a confession of terrorism, no. But this is about the level of discourse that we've come to expect from the DeSantis administration, where willful misinterpretation of words is basically at the heart of everything that they do.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's more we could say about this because there's also all this talk of deportations as well,
Yes,
which is
there
an even worse area.
Yep.
Which I was going to get into, but we are out of time. So I flagged that for next week when I will undoubtedly be talking about Biden v. Missouri. It was topical this week, Biden v. Missouri.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court said they're going to take the case.
Yeah, look, I'm going to have a lot to say about an unfolding college football scandal, though, next week involving the University of Michigan.
Really? So the
Yes.
Michigan corner, even better.
Yeah. So you
Okay.
can look forward to that one.
Okay, look, we'll talk about the deportations and the football scandal and undoubtedly Biden versus Missouri.
Yeah,
and,
sure. We'll get to that one. Day.
But yeah, we do need to go. I know you need to go, and I need to get this show either to the Play America because we started a bit late because of all kinds of reasons. But thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Dr. Dave. And well, you should stay peppy, but also, must we always raise the stakes of inconsequential views?
Yes.
That's all right.
That's right.
I'm not sure about that.